In the dead of the night at 1:30 a.m., four young men, all under 24 years old, were dragged into a small house in Nakuru and executed, each shot in the head and chased by police officers. By morning, the then Nakuru Police Commander, Peter Mwanzo, faced the cameras weaving a false tale that the dead were notorious criminals killed in affairs exchanged deep in the thickets. Tonight, Murder Tapes picks the role of setting the record straight, and we hate to be the ones to do it. These killings were no firefight. They were cold blood executions. And the IPOA, despite having the truth within reach, has taken 3 years to investigate a case that can ordinarily take a month, and there is no end in sight. This story, I must remind you, isn't about the innocence of the dead. It's about the guilt of the killers. When the law becomes the executioner, who will defend the truth? Here now is the story the police didn't want you to hear. Murder Tapes, Butchers of Nakuru, starts now.
These 5 arrows are highly poisonous.
I had never met a police officer so soft-spoken and one who calculated their words, emotions, and demeanor as they lied to the public until I met Peter Mwanzo. From the tone of his voice, the pauses in his statements, and his facial expressions, you will have no doubt that the man is speaking the truth. Mwanzo is a good communicator, and he loves the press too. In short, any police service would be lucky to have Peter Mwanzo as its spokesperson. Mwanzo had always been a dramatic police officer, and this has nothing to do with his suddenly acquired night vision glasses. Immediately, he was appointed as Nakuru County Police Commander. Mwanzo had this decorated track record of tracking down and dealing with people who truly, or in his mind, were dangerous criminals. Their deaths in an alleged shootout with police or discovery of their bodies in a forest was always preceded by a press conference announcing to the public the presence of a dangerous group of people out there. Peter Mwanzo also had a successful track record in investigating cases. But that was several years ago, in 1995, when he began his career at the Central Police Station. In 2004, 2005, thereabout, when he worked at Kasarani Police Station, and also during his days as the head of the crime branch at Gucha Police Station in Nyanza, Kenya. In fact, I remember how, together with Maxwell Otieno, a celebrated investigator now at the DCI headquarters, Mwanzo had managed to ensure that Patrick Lesadala is jailed. Lesadala was a prison ward at Kamiti Prison and had one morning, very early in the morning, gone to the armory, asked for a pistol ostensibly to hunt down Landry Sironga, a convicted Mungiki sect escapee. Landry Sironga had escaped prison in September 2002, 3 years earlier. Instead, Lesadala went to his lover's house in Zimmerman, and as her 12-year-old son watched, Lesadala pumped about 4 bullets into Diana Karambu, killing her instantly. Maxwell Otieno and Peter Mwanzo meticulously tied Lesadala to the crime, despite him creating a counter-narrative complete with witnesses. That was Peter Mwanzo back then. The only extrajudicial thing about the case was the detention of Patrick Lesadala. The man was held at the Kasarani Police Station for 114 days without trial. The Court of Appeal almost set him free in a 2019 judgment, were it not for Peter Mwanzo's new alibi, claiming that he detained the man awaiting the 12-year-old witness to process his grief. The Asike Makandia, Gatembu Cairo, and Agnes Murgor bench threw out the 6 pillars that Lesadala relied on to press the case. Lesadala was sent back to prison. While working as the police commanding Kasarani Division, Mwanzo's time at the helm was characterized by a number of bad things following those branded as top criminals. These included the killings of 4 people whose bodies were found in Kijabe Forest after converging at Kasarani police station at the request of a mystery woman. Another body, that of Joseph Njau, a Njiru Ward MCA aspirant, was found. Njau had 2 records. He was a drug trafficker and an anti-drug abuse campaigner. Talk of 2 personalities.
Plantain and watermelon.
In fact, I remember 3 years earlier, in February 2019, I gained exclusive access to Njau at the DCI headquarters. He had just been arrested in Westlands on his way from Uganda with heroin hidden in pawpaws and plantains. And then there was the brazen execution of Samuel Mugota along Mirema Drive. That background is very necessary. Let's drop it for now and allow me to take you to July 15th, 2022. For that is the crux of this episode of Murder Tips, the Butchers of Nakuru. And so, it begins. Peter Mwanzo had been promoted from the role of Sub-County Police Commander Kasarani to become the new police chief in Nakuru County. He had just taken over from Beatrice Kiraguri at a public baraza in Bahati constituency. And the then Minister for Security Fred Matiang'i was here to announce his arrival.
Huyu ndio police commander wetu mpya wa hapa. Baada atakuwa na sisi hapa, tasimamia kazi mpya. Kwa sababu tunataka uwajibikaji na kazi ifanyike vizuri, kwa sababu hatuwezi kuishi kwa nchi ambao wakora wanatembea kwa miji mpaka mchana. Nimekuja hapa na Kinoti mwenyewe. Kinoti haendangi field ovyo ovyo hivi ukimwona DCI. Tunataka kufuata hawa watu wote mahali popote waliko.
This meant that a new sheriff was in town. His arrival meant business, but it also meant a disregard for human rights had also been announced. Some people thought so, but Fred Matiang'i said it out loud.
We are going to engage these people and we will deploy unprecedented fire and force kwa hawa watu. Na mtu asije kunilecture mimi hapa kuniambia mambo ya human rights.
July 15, 2022 was just another day in Nakuru. This was 16 days after Mwanzo took over the reins of power. Peter Mwanzo assembled journalists in his office to announce one among the latest breakthroughs in crushing criminals in Nakuru. Mwanzo announced that his officers had survived a near-death experience while warding off armed criminals, about 8 of them in number.
We were conducting a patrol. Police were conducting a patrol in the areas of Barut location. This following the heinous act some 2 days ago, where an innocent lady was chopped off her head. Until now, she is still unknown. It appears that the gangs have now opted to leave the city, and they are operating from the outskirts. That's where they are causing terror. And acting on some information, they spotted some young men who are maybe possibly waylaying anybody by the roadside. And because my officers were not in uniform at that time, they opted to attack the officers without knowledge, and the officers fired in the air as a warning shot for them to surrender. Now, unfortunately, these guys, I think because they were dragged in a way, they decided to confront the officers with this panga. We have a panga here. And all of a sudden, after realizing that these are they are security officers, they raised an alarm by themselves. In other words, calling for the other gang members, who also came out with bows and arrows, and they were now shooting at officers. The officers also, the operation was big, so other officers joined in, and there was a shootout. They defied several warning shots, and then police had no any alternative other than to exactly do what they were supposed to do, that is, put them down. And some of them were fatally injured. 4. In fact, 4 were fatally injured. And another maybe 3 or 4, the number we could not really establish properly, they ran into the maize plantation and with gunshot wounds. We were able to recover all these weapons, and in the process we realized that so much drugs in the name of cannabis sativa, this is all bangi.
Mwanzo is a master of narratives. The narrative he put out there was that dangerous gang members had been killed by police. This was supposed to herald his success in fighting criminal gangs in Nakuru. But if you remember how we introduced this story, the police commander lied to the media for over 30 minutes in a press conference that he called himself. Take 2 seconds and imagine the audacity of inviting the media for a barrage of lies and narrative management. It's time to show you how those lies were carefully calculated and told. But before that, let me explain why Police Commander Peter Mwanzo is featuring a lot in this report. This episode of Murder Tips is anchored on the doctrine of command responsibility, as High Court Advocate Kiroko Ndegwa now explains.
The doctrine of command responsibility is an international law doctrine that places the responsibility to the person who has the control of a certain group. Sometimes can be either the military or the police, even the illegal groupings. The person who has the effective control of that group. And there are 3 elements to it. Is that person has to have effective control. He is able to have either discipline, a member who is either wrong, is not following the commands, or is executing commands without his approval. Number 2, the other element for that demand is that a person has to have knowledge that a certain bad thing, a bad act is about to be done or to be effected by his subordinates. And the third now element is that he has done nothing to either prevent or stop that bad act.
If Peter Mwanzo did not lead the team that executed the boys, he knows who did, or he ought to know. How else would he call the press to brief them on a matter that he had no knowledge about?
If you followed the Rwanda International Tribunal for the Rwanda trials, this doctrine of command responsibility featured heavily, that it is not enough to say, I wasn't there, this was done by my junior.
That is the law. 4 young men, Collins Kibet Kirui, Collins Kipkorir, Kevin Kipyegon, and Dennis Kipchirchir, were gunned down by police, accused of belonging to the notorious Confirm gang But were they truly criminals or victims of a flawed justice system? They hailed from Barut Ward in the heart of Nakuru County, a community striving for peace amidst challenges. On the night of the macabre executions, Mzee Samuel Cheriot was woken up by the barking of his dog. He had heard someone kick the dog and knock on his son Elvis' door before another voice quickly informed the knocking man that was the wrong door. Bosco, as he's called, may not remember the ordeal of that day. As Murder Tape's videographer Dennis Gikera whistled at him to stand up, he stared with rage.
Wakati hiyo ndio nikasikia mbwa akipenda. Mbwa alikuwa analala hapo. Hiyo alikuwa sijajenga, sikujanga alikuwa sijajenga. Lala. Nikatoka nje. Kwanza alipiga teke yungu. Kutoka nje. Akafunguka nikapitia hapa. Wageni alikuwa hapa. Najua bibi yangu alikuwa ni wale. Sipasio. Alimaliza siku mbili. Bibi. Hata wageni alikuwa hapa na ndugu ya babangu na vijana wengine hata huyu alikuwa wengi, na nilikuwa na mgonjwa tena ya bibi yangu vijana hapa ndani. Sasa nikakuja hivi nikasimama kwa hii milango, nikaona nikaenda niko na toki kusimama hapo, ninaona maaskari. Nilikuta tatu na mmoja alikuwa ndani. Yari ameingia ndani amebomoa mlango. Nikamulika hawa. Mwenye alikuwa ndani akasema, wewe mzee, toka hapo usikaribia hapo, toka.
Kutoka kwa nyumba juu walikuja wakabisha mlango wangu. Nikasikia sio hii mlango, kuna mlango mwingine iko nyumba yake. Sasa wakati walienda hivi nikaamuka. Kuamuka hivi na mzee na ameshaamuka. Walisikia mbwa ikibweka. Akaamuka.
The man police wanted was Collins Kipkorir, Samuel's youngest son. At 21 years old, he had a pregnant girlfriend who stayed with him. By the time Collins is being taken, the entire homestead is full of visitors. Just 2 days ago, Daisy Cherono was buried. Daisy was his mother. She was separated from Samuel Cheriot, but the man says culturally he had to bury her despite being away for about 10 years.
Hata huyu anajua. Hata huyu akitoka kwake aende tu, lazima muende akuje mpaka kwake maliko watoto.
There was too much grief in one family. Collins Kipkorir grieving his mother, the same Kipkorir with a pregnant girlfriend who needs care, and a brother who was sick at the time. Collins Kipkorir was taken by police to this small house, but here he was not alone. He met 3 other friends, Collins Kibet and brothers Dennis Kipchirchir and Kevin Kipiegon. Nicholas Koech narrates how his nephew Collins was picked up.
Collins Kibet alikuja kutolewa kwa nyumba on date 14. Akapelekwa nje na akiwa amelala watatu. Baadaye hawakuachilia, akaja mpaka nyumbani. Wakaniamusha, wakaniambia ndugu yetu amechukuliwa na maaskari na tumjui anampeleka wapi na sisi tumechapwa. Kwenda kuamka tukaambia tu acha kesho tuende tumtafute ni police station gani amepelekwa.
Collins Kibet lived in this rented house for about 3 months before his death. For context, Collins lived in Kericho. He had visited his grandmother and uncles and had been around for roughly 2 months before police accused him of attempted murders of police officers on patrol and a lot more. Inside the house where Kibet lived with his girlfriend and Kevin Kipiegon, police had turned the place upside down. When NTV visited the scene in 2022, evidence of ransacking was all over. Kibet had these tiny, quickly growing dreadlocks that apparently police did not like. Together with Kevin Kipyegon, they were frog-marched as the last victims of the bloody killings that night. His girlfriend says they were in handcuffs and no one said anything.
Wakamfunga pingo and then wakatolewa nje, tukalalishwa wote chini. Mimi nikaamshwa na nikafukuzwa. Hata nilikuwa nawafuata. Nilifika pale tulikuwa tunafika, nilifika kwa barabara nikafukuzwa. Nikaambiwa nirudi kwa nyumba ndani kalale nivae sweta na viatu. Sasa ikakuwa ni hivyo tu. Sasa mimi sikufika hadi huko juu kwa brother yake penye ilifanyikiwa kitendo yote.
The place the girl is talking about is this house. Remember when we began, Samuel Cheriot's son had also been taken. So by now, there are 4 people in this house. This story, especially the names, can be quite confusing. So it is therefore of importance that we go over it one more time. Now listen carefully. It is the night of July 14th, 2022. Dennis Kipchirchir, together with his girlfriend, is supposedly sleeping in this house. As the two sleep, police officers bang the door open and hold the duo hostage. In the meantime, some of the officers go to a neighbor's home to pick one young man, which man is Collins Kipkorir, a 21-year-old quarry worker, the son of Samuel Cheriot. Another set of police officers proceed here and pick Collins Kibet, a 16-year-old boy from Kericho, alongside his friend Kevin Kipyegon, a 20-year-old. Collins and Kevin are brought to this house, Kevin's home. Kevin and his elder brother, 23-year-old Dennis Kipchirchir, are the only people who own this house for now. You will understand why later on. So, there are 2 victims by the name Collins. There is Collins Kibet, the 16-year-old Rastaman whose Rasta police don't like, and Collins Kipkorir, the 21-year-old who loved flowery shirts. Then there are brothers Dennis Kipchirchir and Kevin Kipyegon. On this particular night, Kevin and his girlfriend Chepko H was staying here with Collins Kibet. For context, Kevin Kipyegon had rented this one-roomed house in Kelelwet, where he stayed with his girlfriend, and for the last 2 months, he has been hosting Collins Kibet, the Rastaman. For now, Kipyegon's girlfriend has been set free to go home as the duo is handcuffed and frog-marched to their execution.
By killing the boys in the way they did and shamelessly lying about it, the police sparked a wave of anger and disbelief that was felt in the eyes and voices of grieving families and neighbors as Murder Tapes conducted interviews. But that is not worrisome enough. The execution was so premeditated that Murder Tapes has learned that some of the police officers involved in the killings were from Kasarani police station here in Nairobi. We take a short break.
Dennis and Kevin were orphans. Their parents died several years ago. Their father in the year 2000 and their mother in 2017. Their 2 sisters, Millicent and Maureen, are married several kilometers away. Dennis and Kevin were supported through their education by Catholic Church in Kelelwet, Barut. Locals say, like many other youths, the duo worked in these quarries for a living. We spoke to the boys' sisters, and for the first time, we could get an insight into what really happened the night they were executed, extrajudicially. That night, so many people were making phone calls.
Sister yangu alipigiwa simu na girlfriend wa ndugu yangu mdogo. Akaambiwa maaskari wamekuja, wakaingia kwa Kevin na wakauliza Kevin atuziko wapi bangi yenye anauzanga. Kevin akasema yeye hauzangi bangi, yeye anaendanga Kware. Akarudi akapigia sister yangu Millicent simu. Akamwambia nakupigia simu juu maaskari wamekuja kwa Kevin na wamemchukua Kevin wameenda na yeye. Ndio maana nimekupigia simu nikujulishe. Na yeye sister yangu Millicent akarudi akanipigia simu saa 6 ya usiku. Si kuchukua simu hiyo masaa.
Nikapigia Deno. Nikapiga ya kwanza. Deno simu inaitana haichukuliwi. Nikapiga ya pili. Simu haichukuliwi. Nikapiga hadi nikachoka. Nikarudi nikapigia sister yangu. Nikamwambia haki nimejaribu kupigia Deno simu na achukui. Sijui ameweka wapi simu. Na Deno lazima akuwe na simu kila siku. Sijui leo kumeenda aje. Tukaachania hapo. Sasa tukalala. Kufika asubuhi bado Deno hakuwa anachukua simu, bado tu inaitana. Sasa hata sikukumbuka tena hata kupigia ule Chepkoech simu tena hiyo masaa. Nikasema wacha tupigie jirani anaitwa Naomi. Tunaishi wote hapo. Nikamwambia Naomi, jana tumepigiwa simu Kevin ameshikwa na Deno hachukui simu. Najua ni jirani, enda utuangalilie ni nini mbaya.
Indeed, there was something wrong. But what Maureen and Millicent did not know at the time is that Dennis and Kevin were actually at the same place that night, their house. As Millicent and Maureen made phone calls that night, Samuel Cheriot and his son Elvis were outside, looking and listening to what was happening.
Sasa nikasimama hapo na mwezi alikuwa anawaka pia. Akatoa tu kabisa mzuri kama tai. Mitano kabisa. Sasa hiyo.
Si usiku imenyamaza, hakuna watu, imenyamaza kabisa. Sasa unasikia hata mwenye anaongea.
Moments after they were taken, several gunshots were heard. Mzee Cheriot could see from his home so many flashlights. Elvis was atop a tree, seeing the entire ordeal unfold, albeit not as clear as he would have wanted it to be.
Kidogo katika Marekani.
Mimi sikulala nikasimama kwa miti. Kama kwa miti hivi, naona matochi yamejaa huko chini. Karibu tulikaa 3 minutes. Katika sasa Marekani kwa
mpaka hata kijana akapanda hiyo miti juu kuangalia. Sasa usipande miti. Yule sasa ataka kuja mpaka hapo.
In the morning, Elvis woke up and went straight to Dennis and Kevin's house. But he wasn't the only person interested in the happenings of last night.
Ndio nikaamka. Asubuhi nitangule kwa ile nyumba kwenda kwa usikia hii marisasi ilikuwa nini.
Naomi akaenda kwetu, akapata mlango uko wazi na damu ilikuwa imejaa chini vile alitujibu. So hiyo saa tukajitayarisha tutatoka hapa, mimi na bwana wangu na sister yangu na bwana na sister yangu. Tukaenda hadi nyumbani. Kufika nyumbani tukaona tu watu wamejaa kwa barabara. Kulikuwa kumejaa watu sana kwa barabara. Kaingia kwa nyumba. Sister yangu alikuwa mjamzito huyu Mrisen. So yeye hakufika kwa nyumba. Mimi ndio nilifika kwa nyumba ndani. Kufika huko niliona ni Mungu tu. Nilipata madamu imejaa kwa nyumba kwa sitting. Nikapata vitu zimetoanishwa kila mahali.
Police were looking out for bullet cartridges as the easiest way to cover up the executions, turning the house upside down. A case of law enforcers who were afraid of the very law they were supposed to maintain. All the 4 boys had girlfriends with them. They were all pregnant at the time. In fact, inside the house where it all took place, Dennis Kipchirchir's girlfriend, only identified as Lynette, was present.
Bata ndiye aliona mzuri. Ndio maskari alikuwa anafanyia vijana.
Linet tu kupata namba yake. Na Linet after hii story, Linet alimisi. Alienda missing. Kajaribu kutafuta namba yenye nilikuwa na hikuwa inaingia. Nikiulizia majirani huko kwa watu wanasema Linet haonekani. Baadaye ndio tulikuja sasa nikatafuta Linet nikampata FB. Nikamwambia nisaidie namba yake ya simu. Akanitumia. Lakini hakunitumia Safaricom, akanitumia Airtel. Hapo sasa ndio nikaanza kumuoji. Hata hiyo time nikimuoji nilikuwa nimerekodi, but sijui kwenye niliweka hiyo rekodi. Sasa ndio nikamuuliza Linet, Deno, wewe ulikuwa home wakati ya vijana watu? Akaniambia maaskari walitukuta kwa nyumba na wakapiga teke mlango na wakaingia kwa nyumba na walitupata hapo pamoja. Nikamuuliza, na wewe kwani ulienda na maaskari? Ati hapana, mimi nilisindikizwa na maaskari. Nikaambiwa ati wewe uende home, juu chenye inataka kufanyika hapa sitaki uone. Sasa hivyo. Sasa tu kujuaga wenye walipeleka msichana kama alienda kwa watu wao ama ni maaskari. Hapo ndio ilitushinda kabisa.
Linet akasema vile alifika nyumbani ya kulala. Akafika sasa aenda aambie nani Kevin. Juu Linet yeye alikuwa ameshajua maaskari watakujia nani? Kevin. Sasa Linet alikuwa anaenda aambie Kevin atoroke, maaskari wako nyumbani. Linet akasema akafika gate ya kina Kevin wakapata imefungwa na kifuli. Kumpigia simu Kevin achukue simu. Ya akaenda kwao. Akasema vile nilifika nyumbani mimi si kulala hiyo siku. Hatukukaa anasikia marisasi sasa zinaanza kupigwa huko. Si ati akakuja pole kitu saa 10. Ndio alikuja sasa akapata hapa hakuna watu, kuliharibika. Na yeye saa hiyo akapanda gari akaenda Mombasa kwa nchi yake.
Let me take you back to how Peter Mwanzo represented the executions.
They spotted some young men who were maybe possibly waylaying anybody by the roadside, and because my officers were not in uniform at that time, they opted to attack the officers without knowledge, and the officers fired in the air as a warning shot for them to surrender. Now, unfortunately, these guys, I think because they were drugged in a way, they decided to confront the officers with this panga. We have a panga here, and all of a sudden, after realizing that these are security officers, they raised an alarm by themselves. In other words, calling for the other gang members, who also came out with bows and arrows, and they were now shooting at officers. The officers also, the operation was big, so other officers joined in, and there was a shootout. They defied several warning shots, and then police had no any alternative other than to exactly do what they were supposed to do, that is put them down. Some of them were fatally injured. 4. In fact, 4 were fatally injured.
Peter Mwanzo was prepared. Watch his tone. Watch his demeanor. Highly trained and a police commander for several years. You will need to be really smart to know that he is lying. The police commander even produced the bang he accused the boys of drawing. He even termed the arrows with him as extremely dangerous without any scientific reports to back it, let alone the fact that linking them to the 4 boys was a work of fiction. That is the Peter Mwanzo I know.
This is all bangi was planted around there, and we started now to uproot, and this is what we are keeping here as exhibit. These 5 arrows are highly poisonous. This is what was being thrown into police. So we had no any alternative other than to do what exactly we were supposed to do.
2 things. This gentleman is there explaining what his police officers did in the cover of darkness. These 4 young men who met their death, they met their death at night. How are they able to identify this tip-off they get? How did did the tip-off come from a victim? Did they find these people in the course of mugging or stabbing those people who allegedly were victims of the mugging? Was there any less severe means they could have used, say arresting them?
Coupled with several eyewitnesses, recordings, and secondary materials, Murder Tapes is convinced that the violence meted on the four was torture and execution, a crime against the international laws and treaties that Kenya has signed.
Jakapiga teke zake. Akatoa, mimi nikakuja kusimama. Hata vitu alikuwa tujatoa ya wageni, vitu alikuwa hapo, hata hema alikuwa hapo hivyo. Sasa nikasimama hapo na mwisho alikuwa anawaka hiyo. Akatoa tu kabisa mzuri kama tai. Nichanga rasita hiyo. Ni akatoa kwa makarini. Nikapata mpaka barabara. Ndio nikajua kumbe iko gari hapo.
We can go a step further by making the difficult decision of showing the crime scene photos of the four boys after they were shot. This is a photo of Collins Kibet and Collins Kip Korir. The two were shot dead inside the small house while in handcuffs. This is Dennis, who was shot at the front side of the house. What you are looking at is a photo of Kevin Kipyegon, the 20-year-old who told his killers, a team of criminal police officers, to kill him next to his mother's grave. These are the men that Peter Mwanzo says were killed in a dangerous shootout. These are the men that Mwanzo says were given a warning shot but engaged police with arrows. These are the men who Peter Mwanzo says grew the bang he paraded to the press. These are the men who Peter Mwanzo told the media were in the company of others before they were fatally shot in the dark of the night. But they are the men that Murder Tapes wishes to declare here and now were executed by lawless police officers. The killings were coordinated, they were bloody and merciless. When Murder Tapes begins to examine the medical report, you will understand the precision with which the boys were killed. Kevin Kipyegon was killed at his mother's grave. He could be heard telling the killer squad to allow him pray next to his mother's grave.
Kuna mwenye alikuwa ana record. Baadaye tulikuja tukaonyeshwa hizo video. Mwenye alikuwa na picha hata video. Na wenye walikuwa na hizo video walikuwa na record. Sasa tukaona kwa hiyo recording tukasikia askari walikuwa wanaambia Dennis ati aseme neno la mwisho before waambie. Dennis yeye akasema anataka kuomba. Kwa hiyo recording yenye tulisikia yeye akaomba. Bila alimaliza kuomba wakamshoot kichwa.
These are difficult interviews. Interviews Murder Tapes wish we didn't have to broadcast. They reignite trauma and families may not easily move on. But they are equally important to paint a picture of how brazen and empathetic and criminal the killings were.
Huyu ndugu yangu mdogo wakamuuliza nao nataka useme neno gani ya mwisho. Yeye akasema kama mnataka kuniua mnipeleke kwa kaburi, mbele ya kaburi ya mamangu. Hapo ndio alimuulia.
Let's look at what their bodies told pathologists. After a push and pull, government pathologist Titus Ngulungu, whom I know to have the clearest handwriting for a doctor, performed the dissections on these victims of a macabre execution. His report showed that they all died of multiple gunshot wounds. But the report spoke a lot about the killers than the victims. All the four boys were shot twice apart from one. They were all shot twice on the head through the left ear and another gunshot on the back, exiting through the left nipple. This pattern and precision sharply and almost immediately shakes and displaces Peter Mwanzo's assertions that the boys were shot as they ran through pits and thickets. Collins Kibet was shot 5 times, but he also had the signature wounds, twice on the head and once through the back, and 2 more shots of a different caliber. Like I said earlier, he had these dreadlocks that police didn't like. He suffered more shots than any other victim. He was 16 years old. When murder tapes visited back then, the walls of the house up in Kelelwet was riddled with bullets. The ground had been dug to clear blood. This sack had contained all stained clothing from the night of terror, and many things including Collins Kibet and Collins Kipkorir's shoes could be found here. After the executions, police were more worried than ever. They insisted that no post-mortem examinations would be conducted and that the 4 boys should be buried quickly in a record 72 hours.
Hata mwingine mzee mwingine wa ndugu ya baba alikuwa akaambia mtu anaweza zikwa aje after 3 days. Kwa nini? Na mbona tungoje tufanye mali? Hata harambee ikifanywa, harambee ilifanywa tu moja hapo ya watu jumla wakiwa waini. Unajua alikuwa vijana waini. Wakafanya harambee jumla alafu akagawa hiyo pesa.
Alisema ashikwa na hakuna kupeleka nini ati kuchinjwa hiyo. Alikuwa amekataa. Ashikwa tu kwa siku 3, hata alikuwa siku 2. Alikuwa amesema siku 2, mwingine akasema hapana, siku 3 ndio nzuri.
As Dennis and Kevin were buried at their home, the community amplified their need for justice. The Catholic Church that had sponsored the duo was officiating their last vows.
Naona kama watatumaliza kwa sababu saa hii kukua youth imekuwa kama ni illegal kwa hii area. Saa hii hata tumejaribu kuita marafiki tuongee hapa mbele, wanaogopa. Mtu anaogopa atachukuliwa jioni. Kabla nitoke hapa tulikuwa na Deno, huyu Dennis. Akaniambia nikirudi atakuwa na function hapa nyumbani. Sasa angalia, hiyo function imekatizwa na mtu. Haitafanyika tena kwa sababu mwenye angeyost ndo huyu hapa. So tunauliza serikali, angalieni haki iko wapi?
Hii jambo ilinishtua sana vile nilisikia hao watu wameuawa. So mimi ni jirani hapo. Mimi nilisikia bullet moja tu, mimi sikusikia mingi, mimi wanalala sana. Mimi nikafikiria labda ni watu wanafanya fishing huko Mwariki, wanakuwa scared. Mimi nikalala. Kuamka asubuhi kwenda shule, kuingia hapa sikuamini. The action that was taken was not right. They were supposed to be taken to the court of laws, alafu washtakiwe tu. Hata kama wangefungwa milele, nikuwe namwambia Deno, leo tulikuwa na game, leo tulishinda tu kushinda. Ilinibo sana.
That was back in 2022. 3 years on, nothing has moved. Millicent and Maureen, the only remaining children of the family, continue to helplessly hope that justice will be served someday.
Haikuambia kitu yoyote. Tuliandikishanga kwa hiyo statement, wakasema watakutafuta, lakini hawajawahi kutafuta. Apart from sasa hiyo siku walikuwa wamepigia bwana ya dadangu, akasema wapelekewe picha, wakaitisha picha ya Kevin na Deno, na bwana ya dadangu akapeleka. Sasa tangu hiyo siku hatujaiambiwa kitu yoyote.
Mimi tu chenye naweza taka tu ni justice tu. Juu hata mtu akifanya makosa anashikwa, anapelekwa, nenda anafungwa. Afadhali tungekuwa tunawaona wakiwa huko, lakini si kuuliwa. Mtu akifanya makosa unafaa ushikwa, ufungwe ama uhukumiwe, lakini si kuuliwa. Juu hakuna kitu kubwa walikuwa wamepata wamefanya
wangewaua.
For Mzee Cheruiyot, the complicity of IPOA in the investigation cannot be ignored.
Ni miaka 3 sasa. Ama ngapi mama? Ni miaka 3. Hata alikuwa tumesahau, hata hiyo wasichana najua alikuja, najua hao walikuja lazima akuja hapa nyumbani. Akasema hiyo maneno alienda, nikamwambia sio vitu alipotea kitambo. Alipotea hata usifikirie tena. Hiyo mambo alishanga.
But for Koech, God may have little to do with the sins of these police officers with blood on their hands.
Tumepoteza mtoto wetu ikisemekana yeye alikuwa kaidi na yeye hakuwa kaidi. Hakuna kitu chenye tunajua alifanya ukaidi hii na hii. Sasa ningeomba ukweli tu ijulikane, asimame kotini atuambie nilimuua huyu kijana juu alikuwa mkaidi namna hii namna.
Internal Affairs Department constitutes of the very same officers. Sometimes you find, oh, this person was in charge of internal affairs, has been moved to this other department. So in essence, these are police who are investigating themselves internally. The concept of self-preservation may take precedence over their constitutional duties. But now there is a whole institution that has been created called IPOA. We also have the Kenya National Human Rights Commission. I don't know whether they have taken a keen interest in this. These are constitutional offices and independent commission. I actually find it quite intriguing that we have since 2010 created something called the gradual collapse of independent offices and commissions. People are not really interested in executing their mandate, remaining true to their calling. Pay them a salary and time goes, they clear their term and someone else comes in. And just like that, we create a systemic fall of independent institutions.
On April 25th, 2025, murder tapes wrote to the Independent Policing Oversight Authority seeking an update into this investigation. In a 5-paragraph letter, IPOA chairperson Ahmed Isaac Hassan told Murder Tips that the authority had begun investigations into the killings suo moto. IPOA went ahead to say that documents submitted by police on the incident indicated that police officers who were on foot patrol within Kwamaiko village received information from members of the public that a criminal gang was holed up in an isolated house. That the police officers proceeded to the said house and upon approaching the house were able to identify one person outside armed with arrows. That he was challenged to drop the arrows, but instead he threw the arrows at the officers as he raised alarm, whereby more other men emerged from the house while armed with pangas and arrows. That the gang advanced to the officers while throwing arrows. That the officers shot back and fatally injured 4 suspects. End of quote. Now, I hope you realize something. For the first time, police are mentioning a house. It's an admission that the 4 were killed inside a house. This report is a fundamental departure from what Police Commander Peter Mwanzo told journalists. Now you understand why Murder Tip says Mwanzo is a master of narratives. But IPOA's letter doesn't stop there. It lays bare something else. IPOA admits to having collected every other piece of evidence required in this case. But look at number 8. IPOA requested the DCI Nakuru West and DCI Kasarani Nairobi to forward officers' firearms for ballistic examination, since IPOA noted that some officers involved in the shooting were attached to the Kasarani police station here in Nairobi. Hold up. The police report to IPOA and Peter Mwanzo's presser says that police officers were on foot patrol in Barut Ward. How and why would police officers from Kasarani police station in Nairobi be patrolling in Nakuru on foot? This was an execution mission. Ahmed Isaac Hassan's letter to murder tapes proceeds to say that the only activity pending before submission of the file to the ODPP is obtaining a ballistic report from the DCI Kasarani, Nairobi. And that, even as they await that report, the IPOA has commenced the process of the prosecution of the officers who were involved in the brutal murders of Kevin, Dennis, Kibet, and Collins.
Three years have passed since Dennis, Kevin, Kibet, and Kip Korir were executed in cold blood. Their families are left to mourn in the shadows as the police officers responsible walk free. Once again, this story isn't about proving innocence or guilt of the four. That truth died with the victims. It's about the rule of law and what happens when those meant to uphold it betray it. This wasn't just a violation of the law. It was a deliberate attack on the very fabric of trust and constitutionalism that binds our society together. Thank you for watching. Good evening.